Kamen Rider is one of the oldest Japanese superhero franchises. And what good is a superhero without a great supervillain? Let's take a look at Evolto and his race of planet destroyers. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Speculative Wildlife Research Center. Evolto is the main villain from series Kamen Rider Build, his species being capable of possessing human beings, altering matter, and having a machine that destroys planets. So it sounds like it should be fun to take a Spec Evo look at them and reimagine them in our style. Big thanks to Baroness Augment for sponsoring this episode, and you too can support and be my superhero by liking and subscribing. And now, without further ado, let's get started. Not long ago, our search for species populating space began, and the data it has given us has been invaluable. And yet, sometimes the information we gather is less a promise of knowledge and connection with the universe around us, and more of a threat of what lurks in the dark. One of these expeditions, commanded by researcher Katsuragi, was among the first to be led by actual humans as opposed to being remotely controlled, and would soon become one of the reasons for the cancellation of this particular program. The information presented here was recovered from Dr. Katsuragi's log, sent from scans, observations, and notes made as he explored a dormant spaceship as a warning about the beings found within it, and the technology they had developed. But first, let us talk about the biological inhabitants of the vessel. Already unnerving from the word go, our research has revealed these organisms are composed of multiple, disorganized and mostly undifferentiated cells, which grow by transforming nearby cells into their own. They are, for all effects and purposes, living cancer. Their evolutionary origin, indeed, does not seem to be too dissimilar, having begun when a lineage of cancerous cells evolved the capacity to develop different cell types to adapt to their host, and natural selection guided these lineages through their ability to develop structures to infect and inhabit hosts with. Then, they developed the capacity to form neural cells, and, eventually, a consciousness within them. As this cell lineage began reproducing and infecting other hosts, each of these new lineages would develop a consciousness of its own. As many organisms, these lineages need sources of energy and biomass to perform their biological processes. The first of these was easy enough to obtain, as the planet these organisms originated on is radioactive, owing mostly to the radiation from their star. And so the beings living on it evolved to be autotrophs, utilizing this radiation in a manner similar to the use of sunlight by plants. The energy obtained will be utilized to power the internal systems of each cell, activating their physiological processes. This energy, however, is also used to power an extreme defense mechanism, which allows the individual to channel this energy outwards in a powerful blast. That said, it's a very risky mechanism to use, both due to the amount of energy involved being potentially harmful to the individual and its host, and due to the loss of energy, being a last resort akin to an animal puking or shooting its own blood in self-defense. As for the obtaining of more biomass, used for growth, reproduction and regeneration, these parasites depend on infecting and assimilating a viable host. Only a single cell is needed to begin the infection, which will then begin breaking down the biomass of its cells around it in order to replicate, creating different types of cells for the purposes of, for example, breaking down biomass more effectively or defending itself from the host. This survival method, of course, requires the host body to remain alive, and so the parasite will work on constantly maintaining the body. And while they can simply live within a host without bringing too much attention to itself, They are also capable of utilizing these cellular mechanisms to freely alter the form of their host, usually for the sake of functionality, the reach of this ability being limited only by the amount of available biomass. They are also capable of using their own neural cells to connect with their host's nervous system, if not overtaking it entirely. Their capacity for cellular production and determination, as can be imagined, also leads to a remarkable regeneration. As long as energy and biomass are freely available, these organisms can produce more cells, making them functionally immortal. They can, however, be killed if they sustain enough damage, and to avoid this, they will scatter smaller portions of their biomass to survive, each of these having a structural backup of their consciousness. This consciousness, of course, is severely diminished, incapable of higher cognitive skills beyond very basic emotions and the need to rejoin with the other portions, or reinfect a host and start anew. The reproduction is asexual, and will be performed by individual lineages producing reproductive cells through the mechanism detailed before. These new cells will be kept inside the parental host body, with the parental lineage providing nutrients until the new one has developed enough biomass to survive on its own. Then, this new individual will be ejected from the parental host and given a first host for it to assimilate. These hosts are chosen for functionality reasons, usually being creatures that most closely resemble the insects or snakes from our world, leading to the preference of snake and bug-like motifs in their culture. As can be imagined, the invasive nature of this life cycle has required the development of specific adaptations, not only on a biological level, but also on a behavioral one. Thus, members of the species have developed a noticeable lack of empathy towards other organisms, as empathy would hinder their ability to infect and assimilate a host, severely reducing their fitness. Of course, their ability to increase their number of neural cells, and therefore their capabilities at will, easily led to the development of intelligence, and the success of this species allowed them to expand to the rest of the planet, with constant exchange between individuals leading to the development of a culture our onboard translators were only capable of translating to ancient Sanskrit, Rakt Yanayati. Their technological developments, from the very beginning and until the present, take the form of nanomachinery, artificial extensions of their own cellular structure and natural biological abilities, which are expressed both on an intracellular level and as a layer of armor around their body and that of their host, as is seen in the subject presented today, an individual named Evolto, whose writings criticizing the current regime provide a wealth of information on their society. This technology enables them to enhance their energy consumption and usage, thus reducing the risk of using energy as a weapon, improving their ability to reshape their hosts and themselves, and even giving their hosts greater physical capabilities. The improved energy usage allows cell production to be increased through artificial cell factories, and has even allowed this species to interface with alien organisms, as the use of artificial means to disassemble the host has prevented different biochemistries from hindering the process. The malleable nature of this technology will allow it to absorb and utilize artificial energy sources, with the protective shell it forms altering as its capabilities increase, allowing an ever greater energy output, although at a very high energetic cost, even allowing abilities such as space travel and teleportation. The fact that this technology, and the ability to enhance its capabilities through biometric locks, were sold to the people, created a divide between the capabilities of those who can afford it and those who cannot. While in ancient time these species organized their societies very loosely, based on the strength of each individual resulting from the assimilation of hosts, the proliferation of this technology created a huge gap between those with and those without power, creating an indirect and very strict cratocracy. Even with this in mind, it is likely the most impressive example of their technological advancement is the creation of the Pandoran Ox, the very spaceship entered by Dr. Katsuragi. Leaving aside its ominous name, which might seem familiar to our ears, this machine is autonomous and separate from their biological components, yet its purpose is a terrifying extension of themselves. This machine is capable of destroying entire planets by bombarding them with neutrons, initiating a process of nuclear fission that releases colossal amounts of energy from the planet's atoms. This energy will be remotely absorbed by the Ox through highly efficient ports that emulate the properties of a black hole, although at a much lower scale, absorbing the electromagnetic waves while filtering out any remaining matter. This energy is stored inside the Ox and transmitted on command through electromagnetic waves towards their technology. Observant watchers will notice, despite its reach, the technology and society of the raft did not alter their nature. They felt they had the right to plunder the stars to their heart's content, and their lack of empathy extended to all other sapient races. And so, they went from parasites to conquerors to planet eaters. The same behavior but on a different scale. So far, we are lucky that this species, as many others, have not come to be aware of our civilization, even as Dr. Katsuragi sacrificed himself to avoid his own capture, thus preventing knowledge from our civilization to fall on their hands. However, some of our researchers have found a certain, disturbing similarity between these organisms and some samples recovered in the Antarctic not long ago, but more research is still needed. And that's it for Speculative Biology look into Evolto. I had never watched Kamen Rider before, but after managing to grasp the lore as best as I could, with no little external help, I must say this one was a really fun episode to work on. In universe, these beings go around possessing people, and Varanus' idea was turning them into a species of living cancer, which I felt made for a really interesting Spec Evo concept, explaining their ability and need to do so. That left the issue of how on earth you can reimagine the appearance of an organism that looks like a human because it's literally possessing a human. Well, that was just an extension of their canon ability to reshape matter, including that of their hosts, and their use of insect and snake-like motifs, following which we could simply let them have an interesting looking inhuman anatomy. And by the way, this drawing was unlike anything I've done before regarding the level of detail and materials, which was a really fun thing to experiment with. Aside from that, the application of technological developments to this species was really fun to work with, especially as we adapted this technology to being an extension of their very particular physiology. So I hope you like this one, fellas. Some people have asked to see an episode on Kamen Rider before, so here's a thank you to them. And also big thanks to our patrons and channel members for their support, especially to Varanus Augment for commissioning this episode, and to their pals for helping in the process as well. Remember, you too can join in if you want to support our channel, and you get some nice bonuses too, like seeing all of our creatures and videos ahead of time and helping mold them into shape. Or you can also like, subscribe, or write a comment telling me any type of creature you would like me to give the Spec Evo treatment in the show. Any of those really help the channel a lot. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time on the Speculative Wildlife Research Center.